You are now listening to the IELTS podcast. Learn from tutors and ex-examiners who are masters of IELTS preparation. Your host, Ben Worthington.
Hello. IELTS speaking vocabulary. Talking about books, film and art. Hi there, my name is Ben Worthington, and in this tutorial we're going to look at speaking part 1 questions, part 2 question, basically a cue card, and some part 3 questions. Now, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, then let me just introduce myself. My name is Ben and I am from England. I'm from the north. However, I have lost my accent, but English people and some people very occasionally, they can place it. There are a few vowel sounds left over from the north. Just the other day, actually, we were in the bar and the waitress asked us if we want to pay by cash or by card. And I said card and she didn't understand. Apparently, I pronounced the word card differently. I guess in the south they would say card, and in the north it's card. Anyway, so I started teaching IELTS a long time ago. I left England, I went to Spain, I started teaching English, then all my students started asking about IELTS, so I decided to specialize in IELTS. And to improve my knowledge in this area, I started interviewing all the professionals, linguistics, ex-IELTS examiners, current examiners, career teachers, anyone I could find. And then I put all the knowledge, if it worked, I tested it out on my students. If it worked, I put it in the Jump to Band 7 or its free IELTS course. But then the course wasn't enough. I realized it wasn't enough. You know why? Because just the knowledge is never enough. You need to have feedback on whether the knowledge you are applying is working. So we added feedback to the course and then we could build it up, and we were confident enough to add the guarantee of Jump to Band 7 or it's free. So if you want to start that journey, have a look at IELTS Podcast. We've got a special promotion now. We've got some very discounted essay corrections available. So have a look at that. If you're serious about improving, go over to IELTSPodcast.com, sign up to the newsletter, and you will find all the available offers we have, especially regarding essay corrections, which is a good way to start the course. Now, before we jump into the topic today, which is about books, film and art, cultural cultural elements, cultural topic, I guess, I want to review some useful adjectives. Then we'll look at some useful collocations. Now, if you've heard this podcast before, you know that collocations definitely help you to improve your they make you sound more like a native English speaker, and also it's easier to understand a person who's using collocations, because collocations are basically a group of words that you expect to find together. And as a listener, i.e. an examiner, once you hear the beginning of the collocation, once it's started, you're expecting the second part of it. Okay? And this is what makes it easier to follow somebody who's using collocations, because you're half expecting them to finish it. You're half expecting the next few words, so you can kind of switch off. It makes it that little bit easier. It seems like it flows, and they're just definitely useful tools. Here's a side note, by the way. Very easy ones and universal ones are definitely valuable because you can use them in any topic, any speaking exam. And here's 3 off the top of my head. That was just another one, a bonus one. 3 off the top of my head that I could just give to you now. So one would be, if I remember correctly, and I'll use these in this tutorial I'm giving you now. If I remember correctly, if my memory serves me well. And then a really useful one is, this is mainly because of 2 reasons. Firstly, XYZ, and secondly, XYZ. And that is a super little structure just to help you organize your thoughts. Now, let's jump into this. I'll give you some definitions or some collocations. We've got black humor, England, and there's a few places in the world where black humor is quite common, and I know for sure England is one of them. And in other places, it's just weird. Like I remember numerous times given a black humor joke in the classroom with some adult students, and they just looked at each other and went silent, and it was kind of uncomfortable. And so I've learned not to do it. That's why I'm not going to give you an example in this tutorial. So we've got black humor, we've got adapted from fiction, maybe not so much a collocation. Adapted from fiction is a film which was first a book, a rom-com movie, a romantic comedy, cover to cover, that means from start to finish. Let's see, cultural heritage. Cultural heritage, it's like the background or history of a country. And final one, commercial blockbuster. That's an easy one. You know, all the Marvel franchise, for example, is just a commercial blockbuster. Adjectives. Adjectives are insanely powerful and they're insanely easy to implement. For example, if you say something like, I like films, they're very nice, how ridiculously boring is that? How ridiculously boring. They are very nice. Nice, good, bad, big, small, horrible words. Let's get rid of them. Let's delete them from the English language. Let's use richer vocabulary. For example, provocative, enchanting, haunting, captivating, compelling. And I'm a big fan of rich adjectives because the grammar rule behind them is ridiculously easy. You know it inside out already. So if we just go back to the example I was talking about before, I like films, they're very nice. No, I absolutely adore watching films. I think some films can be so enchanting. For example, I watched Crash about 10 years ago and it had me on the edge of my seat. Okay? So it just makes it so much richer. Let's go through some typical task part 1 questions. Examiner, do you enjoy reading for pleasure? Okay, I'm going to read just from a sample answer. Yes, I do, but I do admit that with all my studies right now, I don't have a lot of time to curl up with a book. When I do, for example, on holiday, I love thrillers or action books with a strong plot line, which I can read cover to cover in a few hours. Super. Would you rather watch a film or read in your free time? Well, in my free time, sometimes we'll watch a movie, especially if the weather's bad. My girlfriend really loves rom-com movies. Personally, I'm not that keen. I prefer to watch films that have been adapted from fiction, for example, Lord of the Rings. And I also like strong characterization. You know, when the main character has been really like dramatized and has got a strong role in the film. And there's lots of different strong characters within the film. What was the last book you read and would you recommend it? Well, the last book I read was, I think, an inspiring book called The Human History. It was recommended to me by a colleague, and the themes are philosophy, kindness, and communication. I found the narrative captivating, compelling, and surprisingly comprehensible. I'd definitely recommend it to anyone interested in understanding humanity a little better. You see, even that last word, a little better, we could improve it for a little deeper. So there we go. Let me just review some of the adjectives there. Captivating, compelling, and surprisingly comprehensible. Captivating, compelling, and surprisingly comprehensible. Hopefully you've got a pen in front of you, you're writing these down. Other topic-specific vocabulary that will help you boost your score. Adapted from fiction. Strong characterization. Rom-com movie. What's a rom-com movie? Hope you remember. Romantic comedy. Cover to cover. Thrillers. curl up with a book. All of these are useful phrases, topic-specific vocabulary. It's going to get you to the next level. Cue card. Now remember, when we get our cue card, the part 3 questions will normally be following on from these. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Typical cue card. Describe a book or a film that had a strong impact on you. You should say, what was it? When you read or saw it, how it influenced you, and say if you liked it and why. So we've got the typical structure of what, why, when, how. Okay, and we can base our cue card presentation off this structure. So I'm going to read you a sample one from a student, which has been transcribed. When I used to live in Paris as a teenager, I became rather obsessed with watching what might be called artistic French films. My favourite was called Paris at Midnight and was directed by Louis Truffaut. Often he filmed in black and white and told a rather dark story. The genre could be described as black humour or drama, I suppose. While many of my friends were happily absorbed in the latest James Bond movie or other rather commercial blockbusters, I took pride in educating myself in the traditions of the French cinema and trying to learn a bit of French at the same time. This film in particular had a lasting impression on me. I think, in fact, it had been adapted from a bestseller, and since it has inspired other cartoon spin-offs and series as well. The beautiful and mysterious heroine was both provocative and enchanting. It was impossible to predict how she would react in a situation, which kept the tension in the film very high. Added to this was a haunting musical score written by a famous French musician, and this also became a top-selling album in the charts. This film, and others like it, inspired me to work harder on my French language skills and to really investigate the history and culture of Paris in greater depth. At the time, I would have said that I enjoyed it, but in hindsight, I think it was probably not a very relaxing watch, and today I would opt for something less intellectual. Now, what I like about this presentation, we've got that little anecdote that adds a little bit of colour, adds a little bit of personalization. The examiner can relate to this student, and also it just adds more depth and more colour. The personal opinion here, and also there's this nice little contrast. At the time, I would have said that I enjoyed it, but in hindsight, I think it was probably not a very relaxing watch, and today I would opt for something less intellectual. How good is that? We've got two different tenses there. We've got the conditional, past conditional. It's just a great way, and we've added our character in there as well. Also, you can tell from that little anecdote that the candidate in this situation has grown. They've changed their opinion. So we've got a little bit of a transition there, tiny little story, a little bit of intrigue. So let's have a look at the more basic level and a more basic level analysis. We've got some great vocabulary: provocative and enchanting, tension, haunting musical score, lasting impression, commercial blockbuster, genre, a French word taken straight from the French language and put straight into English to confuse English students. Okay, so that's a great little presentation. Let's just review the cue card, what it was. French film. What was the title? Paris at Midnight, very clear. When you read or saw it, quite straightforward. And we've got a time frame. The student watched it while they were in Paris, while they were studying the language, how it influenced you. In this way, it influenced the speaker because they got to know Paris on a different level. And if you liked it and why. And he says, yes, he did like it, but in this case, now he's moved on. He liked it at the time, but not so much now. We'd go for something else. So great little cue card presentation there. Now, because we're flying so well in this test, we're going to go into part 3 questions. And these, remember, are going to be a little bit more challenging. They are definitely more open-ended. In our Speaking Confidence course, we give you strategies just to work through these a little bit easier, and strategies just to buy you time, because they can catch you unawares, i.e. they can be not completely out of the blue, but they can be, I think a better phrase would be they're quite abstract topics, and they're topics that you've probably not spoken about ever, or at least recently. Let's go into it. Do you think people go to the cinema as much as they used to? No. And there has been a sea change in the way people choose to view films nowadays, which has been reinforced by the recent pandemic when cinemas and theatres were closed. Even before this disaster, many filmgoers had the option to pay for online streaming of the latest releases via the internet, so they could enjoy the thrills of the cinema, but without leaving their sofas. Companies like Netflix and Amazon have led the way in this new trend and commission films and drama series of their own. Beautiful little answer there. We've got some rich vocabulary such as sea change, online streaming, film goers, commission films. And what I like about this is that we've got real world companies, Netflix and Amazon. So if you mention those to any examiner, they will immediately know what you're talking about. And we encourage this not only in the speaking, but also in the writing. Just to use relevant real world examples, add a bit of depth, and just aid your exam score in a positive way. Next question. What do you think about ebooks? In my opinion, paperback or hardback books are much better, and reading a book from an e-reader just doesn't feel the same for me. Many readers value the sensation of turning pages and that special smell of paper. I think that the look and feel of a book can be never replaced by an e-reader, but I understand the usefulness of electronic books. It is very convenient to be able to carry hundreds of books in your pocket, especially when traveling or studying. Okay, vocabulary there: paperback, hardback, e-reader, and it's quite a developed answer. It's not just yes, I think ebooks are good. No, we give our answer and we kind of develop it a little bit further. Also, we've got a tidy little contrast at the end, but I understand the usefulness of electronic books. Coincidentally, I've got an ebook reader. I use it quite a lot, and I got a paperback book as a present. And because I'm not used to reading paperback books, I actually, when I finished the first page, I tried to scroll it. I swiped left, trying to turn the page, and then I realized it's paper. It was quite a funny experience for me. Anyway, just as another side note, I think ebooks are fantastic for foreign language learners. You can touch the word, you can see the definition, you can carry hundreds of different books, and yeah, it's just so much better experience. You can make notes, you can export those notes, you can export the vocabulary, put it into flashcards. It's just accelerated learning. And plus, in my experience anyway, I read considerably faster with the ebook because I can just, increase the font size, decrease the font size. I've got it backlit, so it's not as much of a strainer for my eyes. There's special different fonts, just a million different advantages. Okay, I've finished my advert about ebooks. Let's move on. Should art still play a role in education for students at school, as well as books and films? It's quite a tricky one. This is a perfect example. Like, you're probably hopefully you're familiar with what you might say. However, there is definitely value in reading aloud your answer, because having it familiar in your mind, what you're going to say, is not the same as being able to execute it in spoken English. So write it out, read it out, and you will soon find that you'll soon find some shortfalls. Let's go. It is true that for many young adults and school children, art is not part of the usual education, and they are only able to access an understanding of great, historic and influential paintings if they study art. Many educators argue that art should play as a big role as the appreciation of books or film in the curriculum, as art offers an equally valid perspective on a country's cultural background and heritage. Okay, you could hear me struggle through that long sentence. So I'm not a massive fan of long sentences, neither in writing nor in speaking. So yeah, that just gives you a very real world example of how long sentences can come across. In this specific example, 2 long sentences. I would have, if I was doing this, if it was my own, I would have cut it up, a couple of short sentences, 1 long sentence, and then another short sentence. Okay, vocabulary in this one: historic and influential paintings, appreciation of books or film, and a lovely little collocation: equally valid perspective. Equally valid perspective. And another decent one: cultural background and heritage. So there we go. We've gone through some speaking part 3 questions, the follow-on questions. We answered a cue card and then we broke it down, and then we did the warm-up speaking part 1 questions. Hopefully you had a pen and you took some notes down. If you didn't, there's no harm in listening to it again, writing down the vocabulary that you heard, and then maybe even listening to it again and playing vocabulary bingo. Whatever you do, just make sure you're doing something. Make sure you are taking steps every day to improve your score. It's not going to happen automatically. You need to get your pen out, you need to sit down, dedicate some hours, dedicate a good portion of time and work towards it. Put the work in and you will get that IELTS score improvement. We see it every week. Students passing, sending us emails saying thank you. Then we get them on the podcast, ask them how they did it, just to share with you guys, to inspire you guys. And hopefully we'll be interviewing you soon. So good luck with the IELTS preparation. Keep moving forward. And remember, if you're serious, remember just to take action, invest in yourself. And one of the easiest, fastest and most straightforward ways to get started is to possibly even just get some feedback on either your speaking or your writing. So thank you very much for listening, and good luck with your IELTS preparation.
Thanks for listening to IELTSPodcast.com.